Hello.
All right. How's it going? Can you hear me?
Doing all right. Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. I'm trying to figure out how this will work. I hope I'm not getting an echo into the stream because
Let me double
sometimes,
check right now.
yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
I think you're okay.
Okay. You can hear us both, but as long as it's not like echoing, I guess, because it's probably projecting. I think it should be fine though. I've had issues in the past where it echoes, but I don't know if I set it up correctly this time. I tried to think it through, but all right. Yeah, I'm gonna start using a timer too. I think it's good to give people a few minutes to kind of trickle in. So, how are you doing today, Maya?
I am doing all right, coming off a long day of work, as I'm sure you are familiar with.
Yep. How's the new job?
I love it.
Nice.
Definitely miss being in a high energy, high like patient level function environment.
Hmm.
But I get to hang out with the sweetest little ladies and little men that think that this is the coolest thing in the world.
Hmm.
And I changed their lives, and I couldn't ask for anything more.
Okay. Awesome. I mean, that sounds pretty nice, honestly. If you enjoy the variability that you have, and you like your patient load, it's always the best. You don't need to do
Oh,
everything high
Kumi.
speed. Yeah, he came over, so I wanted to have him say hello. Hello, buddy. We just went to the dog park, so hopefully he's a little bit tired out. How are you?
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready? Are you live right now?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay. Awesome. Real quick. Why don't while I'm doing this, why don't you give the viewers and listeners a little bit of background as to who you are, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So my name is Maya, or you can find me here on Twitch at Maya Jillian. I'm currently live on my channel, so you can see my face, unless Jordan wants to hop on video call on Discord and we can share our screens there. But I am 26 years old to be 27 in exactly 3 weeks. I am a doctor of physical therapy. I am located on the East Coast, so the complete opposite end as Jordan. And I mainly work in kind of the orthopedic setting, so kind of working with your general population, knee replacements, rotator cuff injuries, balance, and fall risks. I've been playing video games for the majority of my life. I've actually been streaming on Twitch for 5.5 years and never did a 5 year celebration. So I'll be doing that for my birthday, celebrating both that and 5 years on Twitch coming up here soon. I mainly play League of Legends and Dead by Daylight, but sometimes I'll do some variety just chatting streams where I like build IKEA furniture and get stuck in it. So that's me.
All right. Cool. So yeah, I met Maya. She went to the same program as me actually for DPT. So we both went to USC, and so she reached out to me, or I forget if I reached out to you, but basically, way back when I first started up respawn therapy and stuff, I was looking for other physical therapy students that were interested in possibly getting mentored and working on stuff in esports, and she was one of the group that first talked to me. So that's how I met her, and I was like, oh, cool. There were more PTs who are thinking about doing the same thing that I get to do. So hopefully you get to get more into that space as well. Cool. So the reason I wanted to have Maya come on today is yesterday we had a really good discussion about positive masculinity, especially in terms of talking to women and some of the traits and qualities that men could potentially think about exhibiting in their interactions with women that would not, kind of push them into the category of being those toxic males, or trying to, I guess, present like a person that maybe inherently they don't really want to be long term. So I thought it'd be good to get a feminine perspective on that and maybe hear from a woman about what she thinks about masculinity. So,
Yes. And I feel like I also have a unique perspective, especially being, a woman in the gaming sphere. And I'm sure you've met plenty of those as well, but we have a unique connection since we met as colleagues first, too.
yeah. So, generally, what are your thoughts about, I guess, what does it mean to you for a man to be a positive masculine figure?
So, the first thing that really comes to mind is my father. I definitely have compared potential partners or even just other strong male presences in my life to my dad. He's very
Um,
sure of who he is. And one thing that I really learned from him, either from a male or female perspective, is he never really backs down. He really stands true to what he believes in. And I've always found that when someone is extremely passionate about something, even if it's not a what's the word I'm looking for? So like let's say it's like a hobby or something that I don't necessarily subscribe to, but if you're passionate about something and you're driven to do something, that just makes you that much more approachable, that much more attractive in my point of view.
yeah. And then how does that contrast with some of the stuff that you've seen online about people who are maybe less positive male figures? So some of the more toxic male community that we've kind of seen more prevalent today.
I have really seen that they're not to be like cliche, they're the total opposite of that. I don't really feel like these sort of toxic personalities have much going on for them, for lack of better words. They don't really have a drive. They don't have a hobby. They don't have something they're passionate about other than putting other people down and then basically keeping others down so because that's what makes them happy. That's their passion is making people upset and putting others down. And that is not that's not approachable.
Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of push back on that a little bit, I think what attracts a lot of guys to some of those viewpoints, though, are that these people actually talk about being positive models, right? They talk about building up young men who maybe don't have a lot of self confidence and training them to act in a way that exhibits confidence. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of them like to, I guess, intentionally put people down in front of them. It's more so that they try to promote an idea that you should act in a way that makes other people feel worse, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's definitely a better way of saying what I was attempting to say. And there was one thing that I had mentioned on my stream last night, continuing on the topic that you were speaking about, where a lot of the younger generation is still learning. Their brains are growing, neurons are connecting, and they are absorbing so much, and their brain isn't refined to the point where they can turn around and say, okay, that's bullshit. Especially when we were talking about things like Andrew Tate, and someone had reached out to me and said, you know, you made a good point about how why I feel the younger generation should not listen to people like Andrew Tate. It's because they can't discern like joke or dark humor or even a BS statement from reality. And that's what's really dangerous about these quote unquote positive role models.
Yeah, but that's also, I mean, it's tricky because experience and experiential values can only come about through time, right? Most people don't have a
Mm-hmm.
ton of uh, experience available to them, especially in a wider variety of settings around a wider variety of people. So, I mean, what are some things that you've seen that are, I guess, indicative of someone who hasn't had a lot of that experience?
I find that people who don't have a lot of experience get very defensive. And rather than saying, okay, this was a learning experience, let me internalize this and move on, they turn right around and say, no, you're the reason I'm having a bad experience. You're the problem. And do not own up to having that sort of learning experience. And another thing on top of that is lack of adaptability to be able to change their approach when trying to speak to women or go out. They don't have the ability to say, okay, well, that didn't work, so let me try it like this next time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think it's a lot of it is insecurity,
Mhm.
but it's also being scared to take those risks.
So it's a combination of you're saying that they don't have enough experience because they're not willing to take enough risk. So when they do take the risk and they fail, they don't chalk it up to, well, I need to improve. They chalk it up to, oh, this is why I don't talk to women, and this is why, I'll never ever have a chance with some of these women.
Exactly.
When you're saying like, okay, if you just throw yourself out there and get the experience and actually reflect on how you can improve in your approach, or how maybe like what are some things that you did that might have, I guess, caused the negative reaction, then you should be better at it. Like most things in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just like anything else. Like you said, it's you learn, you grow from it, and
Mhm.
you become better.
Now, I talked a little bit yesterday about my approach towards turning myself from a really shy kid, sort of afraid to talk to women outside of just joking with them, like very platonically,
Hmm.
into someone who feels fairly comfortable, like interacting with women on, in the with the intent to like maybe possibly ask them out or date them or whatever. So, what are some approaches you've seen be successful for men to do that in your experience or your opinion?
So I made a just quick comment in your chat last night,
Hmm.
that about something that actually happened recently. I'm in a loving, happy relationship of 5 years, but I appreciated the way that this person had come to speak to me.
Hmm.
It was actually at the gym. Um, I apparently was doing the same leg accessories that he was doing, but one step behind him. So I kind of ended up using the same exact machines as he did. And he would like jokingly gesture after he would clean a machine. He's like, "It's now ready for you," and then would walk away.
Ah,
And I
the
thought it
not
was very
I'm
cute.
not that interested card, but I'm
Correct.
acknowledging your existence.
And then not only that, I actually ran into him 2 days later where I was doing back accessories. And he actually said something to me this time. He goes, "Well, looks like I'm following you around this time." And we had a small conversation. I happened to say, "I'm not good with faces, but I thought you were the guy I ran into a couple days ago." He goes, "Yeah, the problem is I'm not good with names, but I think I'll remember yours."
Hmm, charming.
And I just thought that was very unique. And
Yeah,
I appreciated that.
that's great because I guess it kind of goes back to what I was saying for most guys. Like the first time you meet someone, your goal shouldn't be to get their number, ask them out right away, unless that is your goal. But that's much harder to do, especially in a setting like the gym, where, as I was saying yesterday too, women are typically more on guard. It's probably not the best approach to like immediately, hard sell them on why they should go out with you. Um, so it sounds like, he basically inadvertently, or maybe not, ran into a couple times and sort of developed like I guess an inside joke with you, right? Like to build
Hmm.
rapport, like to make it seem like, hey, I'm not trying to be creepy, but I just noticed that, we're in the same pattern of training again. So,
Hmm.
yeah. And then if you weren't in a relationship, that might have gone better. So, but at the same
Yeah.
time, when you told him, oh, I have a boyfriend, what did he say? What
He
was his
said,
reaction?
not a problem. I just appreciate, people who work out hard and go to the gym. Happy I ran into you, wish you the best of luck with the rest of your workout, and went right back to his workout and I went right back to mine.
Nice. And then, yeah, and then things aren't awkward if you see him around anymore.
Nope. And
Yeah.
we still run into each other at the gym.
Yeah. So that's really good because I feel like that's what most guys need to have in the back of their head is that you're not failing, you're asking for the opportunity, right? When you ask
Hmm.
someone to go out with you and they say no, you didn't fail, you didn't get the opportunity to go out with them. That's it. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of times, the no can result from a variety of different reasons. And you don't need to focus so much on the winning losing side of it. It's more so, whatever reason they had, hey, things didn't align for the opportunity to present itself. In the same way that if you just randomly go and ask people to do anything for you, it may or may not go well. So I feel like a lot of the incel takes I've seen have been about when they get rejected, the fault is not theirs, but it's on the woman's
Hmm.
preference, or it's some fault of the
Correct.
woman's life choices or something like that. Um,
Yes.
like, what are your thoughts on that? And when you've heard people say that?
So, right before you move on to that, I think you really hit the nail on the head of you didn't fail.
Hmm.
This is just an opportunity. There is no winning or losing in that scenario because there was never an opening to begin with. You were just looking for the opportunity.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
all there is.
Yeah.
Yes or no doesn't matter. It's still just an opportunity. You don't fail if you get rejected. That's just, unless you're being a creep and they're like, "No, like stay away from me." But
Mhm.
if I say, like, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend," that's not you failing. That's just me having an extenuating circumstance.
Yeah, and that's true. And I think that's also the problem is a lot of these guys who are trying to teach other men like how to date people or how to get women, they approach it as a win-loss type condition. And if you develop the skills, you will always win. And it's as if the woman is constantly, the game is that the woman is constantly trying to deny you. And if you're good enough, you can overcome her walls and force her to like you, which is a really,
Yeah.
really weird way to approach trying to build a relationship with anybody, you
Hmm.
know?
Ask your question about the incel take again. I don't exactly remember what you said.
I was just thinking, what are your thoughts on the idea that,
Oh
these
gosh.
incels are like, oh, it's a woman's fault, basically, that they don't want to date
Um,
me.
I think that a lot of that just comes from the pure shallowness and very thin face value of what you see is what you get. That woman is attractive. I want to be with her. Oh, she said no. She doesn't find me attractive. That's so rude of her. How dare she?
Hmm.
It is never deeper than that. I have never seen people turn down others. Like when in the incel community, when they blame it on women, it's never deeper than I'm ugly. She thinks I'm weird. She didn't like me. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with anything else other than those three
Yeah. I
topics.
always see like, oh, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not ripped enough, and I'm not rich enough. Or
Exactly.
she doesn't like anybody. Like it's also a common one. I do kind of want to talk about this comment from Cutie Kitten. You don't think it's possible to really change these men because they've been conditioned for years, but in my opinion, I think that's the very reason why I think they can change because they've been conditioned to believe something, and with any
Hmm.
conditioning, there probably lies the capability of recondition. If you're,
And
yeah.
I'm sorry, go
No, no,
ahead.
no. I was just saying, like years of listening, reading, hearing, learning. That's all stuff that can happen both ways, right?
Absolutely. But they have to decide that they want to change. And that's the problem.
Hmm. Yeah,
So, like you said, you can decondition someone and relearn and reteach. But if they don't want to change because they're happy with this attitude, then there's nothing you can do about it. It's
yeah.
just like trying to convince a patient that they're gonna get better, even though they're like, no, I gotta have surgery. I gotta have surgery. And you tell
Hmm.
them, no, like you've made this progress, you made this progress, you made this progress, and they're like, I'm not gonna get better. I have to have surgery. It's the
Hmm.
same exact thing.
Yeah. I think I don't like to go down the road of, well, it's impossible, right? Nothing is impossible, and even like for in your example, patients like that, it might be a really hard conversation that takes a lot of time, but eventually, most of the time, I'm able to break through and make some sort of headway about finding a compromise with them, right? Like, okay, well, why don't we try PT for this amount of time? If you still feel like you need surgery at the end of it, then we can. It's always on the table, right? You do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You basically create compromises. In the same way with a lot of these guys, I think obviously I'm not doing this on a regular basis like I am working with patients, but in my interactions with a lot of men, when they have some of these entitlement beliefs and when they have some of these views on women, I've found that I've been able to at least skew a lot of my friends, right? As I told you, like last time, I was in a fraternity, I've been in the army, like, the fraternity especially, I was able to skew a lot of the mindset that a lot of these guys have towards women by kind of questioning their motives and asking what they really want and figuring,
Mm-hmm.
having them come to the conclusion that what they're really looking for is not, oh, I want to have sex with a whole bunch of women. It's, I want to feel loved. I want someone to care about me. And if that's what you want, then do you think this is actually the most optimal way to go about getting that? Or is it actually better in trying to get closer to your goal to approach women like a partner in a relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And generally, most of them, and I've had a lot of friends who were total assholes in college who hooked up with a ton of girls and, like basically were very, very much of that type of person. And you know what? The crazy thing is like all of them are married now and they've
Yeah.
completely changed like who they are and their approach towards interacting with women clearly, to basically find a wife. I think there's like 5 for 5 out of the guys that I hung out a lot with in college who used to be total players. And they didn't get there by hooking up with a random girl and then continuing to do what they were doing until she just decided to, like, I don't know, they decided to give up and be like, all right, she's the one. It didn't go like
Mm-hmm.
that. They approached the women that they're married to now much more intentionally than any other women that they had talked to in the past.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's it. They went into the relationship initially, not to just hook up with them. They might have met them like that, but I think after meeting them and understanding like, hey, this is actually someone I can see myself being with, they stop talking to other women.
Yeah.
Like that, it just becomes a decision, and they start acting differently towards the one person they're talking to. Um, and so I think if that is kind of the way to get someone to be in a long-term relationship with you, why isn't that the approach to begin with?
I think a lot of it comes down to this feeling of desperation and desire and lust rather than an ability to build something with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It is not approached in a healthy manner where people will let things happen more or less naturally.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of these toxic spaces of the alpha male mentality, it just really almost we're going reverse and back into the dark ages where women are seen as objects and property rather than as an equal human being. And I think that's why some of the younger generation has a hard time making that mentality switch, like you were talking about your friends. They're
Mm-hmm.
just not willing to make that change because they have these quote unquote positive role models that tell them this is the way to do it. And if you don't follow what I say, like you're a loser, you're not going to get money, you're not going to get women. And because there are these sort of like veiled threats almost, they're not willing to change that approach of, hey, this person is supposed to be my partner, they're supposed to be my equal, my other half, and they're not approaching it that way.
Now, to play devil's advocate, this doesn't mean that I'm not an advocate for people approaching relationships casually at first.
Oh, of course,
And
nothing wrong with that.
that's I have to clarify that because like I said yesterday too, like I was totally a person who enjoyed being single. I enjoy being single now, but I wasn't looking for a long term relationship for a lot of college, and so
Yeah,
I think the big difference that I talked about yesterday as well is that you don't want to approach it like, if you want to date a whole bunch of people or you want to just hook up with a bunch of people, you can actually do that in a way that isn't as detrimental to them. If that makes
correct.
sense. Like you can do that by
Absolutely.
yeah, you can do that by being honest. And that's what I was saying yesterday is that you can do that. You can live that sort of you can have that approach towards relationships if you want. And the benefit of that is I think a lot of these guys, the counterpoint is that they found women that they truly love because they explored a whole bunch of different possibilities, right?
Yeah,
They met a whole bunch of different women. They got to know a whole bunch of them. And then they decided that these are the traits and qualities that I can see myself wanting in a long-term partner. And then so when they've met that person who met all those, I guess, criteria for them, then it was really easy for them to decide, oh, this is the one for me, not any of these other people I've talked to.
absolutely. I am of the same mindset as you.
Yeah.
And from the feminine perspective, I was also the same exact way in college. I really was not looking for any sort of long-term relationship. Certainly I dated around, I hooked up with people, I had short relationships, I had relationships that lasted over a year. And like you said, you kind of tease out things that you would like in a partner and things that you would not like in a partner. And, granted, no one's perfect. That's not even possible. And I feel like that is a notion that this kind of incel mindset has, is that there is a perfect woman for me. And if you're not her, get out of my way, essentially. But there's also the entitlement of, oh, I spoke to you and I was nice to you, so I deserve to be with you. And
Yeah.
it's a weird double standard that they set for themselves, and they don't allow themselves to be fluid and have fluid thoughts and see that love is a spectrum just like anything else.
Yeah. Live Evil kind of talked about that again too, is the nice and kind entitlement thing of like, if you're a nice guy, you deserve a chance. You deserve a date. And I was talking about how that's inherently manipulative because
Yeah.
it's a quid pro quo type situation where you're trying to offer something that you think they want so that they give you what you want. But if that's not really what you want to do, right? If you think of it as an exchange of services or you're giving them something, that means that that's not something you would have done otherwise if that trade-off wasn't on the table. So I think they're also always surprised when they try to be nice to women in order to get them to be attracted or to want them. and then they expect the woman to live a lifestyle in which they get to make all the decisions, they get to do everything they want, and the woman should just be subservient and serve them. Like there's a dichotomous comparison there. Like
Yeah.
you can't be nice to someone initially, and then once they start to like you, then expect them to only be nice to you, and you don't have to do all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
it's a really manipulative way to think about getting what you want.
I absolutely agree with that. And, again, from the feminine perspective, I have never once dated or even hooked up with a quote unquote nice guy. Never once, because that's not realistic. Everyone has their own positives and negatives.
Yeah.
I've dated funny guys. I've dated mean guys, but I've never once been with a quote unquote nice guy because that's just weird. Because most funny guys, unless they're doing it for malicious reasons, and guys that tend to be more rude and upfront, that's truly who they are. I am always suspicious of a nice guy.
Yeah.
I am always suspicious of someone who is being very, very nice because I feel like they're trying to get something from me. If you're upfront and even a kind of not necessarily rude, but you come off as maybe standoffish, that's telling me that I'm pretty much seeing what I'm gonna get.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is just, again, honesty about yourself too. I think a lot of people, when they're manipulative like that, they're trying to put on a face or a front to create an image of who they think that you want to talk to, who you should be. And I think that's the other thing too, is like these guys think that because a woman isn't into them, it's a result of what's on the outside, on the exterior, right? You're not showing off enough money. You're not ripped enough. You're not good looking enough. Therefore, she doesn't want to talk to you. Not even realizing like you could be almost broke, not that attractive, and not ripped at all, and you're just really funny, or you're really witty or intelligent, or you make her, feel like you're really interested in what she's talking about. Like you could totally get more girls to spend more time with you doing that than just being a really jacked, awkward person.
Yeah. That's
Like
absolutely correct.
Like
That's absolutely correct.
it's so like, I don't know. I feel like it's so funny because it's so simple. Like all the other stuff that they worry about is literally stuff that's under their control, when in reality, it doesn't even matter nearly as much as them just being kind of a good person to be around, like a fun person to be around. And that's actually where the focus should be, right? Like, why don't you just try having a better personality? That'll get you a lot more women.
And there was someone in my chat who I'm actually pretty close with, just made a comment that said, I'm generally nice now to anyone and everyone, so I'm a quote unquote nice guy. That's not what I mean. Sure, that's your personality, but a lot of women have like these energy radars where
Mm-hmm.
we can actually feel your intent behind what it is that you're saying and doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have met plenty of nice guys where I'm like, "Oh, you're actually a nice guy," but I could tell that they were just being nice because that's who they were as a person. There
Mm-hmm.
was zero intent for anything else behind it.
Yeah.
Women can see through your bullshit.
And that's actually an interesting point too. That's something that I didn't used to believe because there's not a scientific evidence behind why you would be able to feel someone's energy, but I totally believe in that because it applies to more than just this conversation that we're talking about, these situations. Um, like this is completely out of left field, completely different scenario. But when I was in the army, this is actually something they trained us on, was that if you're gonna if you're gonna sneak up to kill somebody, like a guard or something, and you're gonna stab them, you don't want to look at them because they can feel it. You're supposed to watch
Yeah.
their shadow, and you stay low underneath the height of their shoulders so they can't see you in their peripheral vision. And you're supposed to sneak up on them that way. If you look at them, people can sort of feel your gaze. They can almost feel the intent. And that's really weird, but it's literally something we were trained to do because it's something that over the course of hundreds of years of fighting wars, American soldiers have understood that that's just how it is. And I have definitely had moments in which, you get that bad feeling around someone. Like, I just something off about this person. And it doesn't always have to be someone of the opposite gender. I've had weird feelings about guys. I've had weird feelings about girls. Like, hey, you like don't really want to interact with these people. And I think at some level it's an animalistic instinct, right? Like, why do certain
Absolutely.
dogs just dislike certain other dogs? Not all dogs. Like,
No, I absolutely agree.
Kumi's like that. Like, where there's certain dogs and certain people he just doesn't quite like, and it's very rare. But I usually am a little more wary around those, dogs or people. Like, and it's usually pretty consistent too. So it's interesting. I think as we are animals at some level, we probably have some of that capability, and we've gotten really good about hiding it in ourselves as well as hiding it from others.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I feel like that's kind of where, like you were kind of saying, there's no real science behind it, but I think it's a purely primal animalistic instinct
Hmm.
where it's like you can feel someone standing behind you. You're not looking at them, but you can feel them.
Yeah.
Humans and animals give off energies, and you can feel when someone has a certain type of intent. And I feel like what Rainbow Meowie just said in your chat about growing
Hmm.
up with abuse manipulation messes with your ability to detect BS. I dated trash after trash after trash 3 times in a row because of this. Um, I dated someone who used me as a homewrecker in 2 separate relationships, and I had no idea that he was in them.
Hmm.
The second one broke up with me on my doorstep on New Year's with no reason. And the third one cheated on me, got an STD from the person he cheated on me with, and then tried to tell me that I cheated on him and gave him the STD.
Yeah, there's
And
I
those
mean,
were all your stereotypical nice guys.
those are a lot of extreme examples, but yeah, I mean that's now. What do you think? Were there in your mind now, looking back at those, and let me know if this is probably not a subject you want to go into, but
Oh, I will talk about any of this. That's not a problem.
so if you look back at these guys, do you think that there were, I guess, signs that you could have picked up on, or were there things that maybe you kind of realized in the future about certain types of people because of this, like as an experience?
Oh, absolutely. The second one, not so much, but the first one who used me as a homewrecker and the third one who cheated on me, there were actually a lot of red flags with both of them.
Hmm.
With the first one, he actually kind of tricked me into having feelings for him because he posed as everything I could have ever wanted in a partner. We had very similar interests. You know, they say you shouldn't eat where you shit because that's absolutely true. He was on my gymnastics team with me, and that was a bad idea.
Hmm.
So that should have been the first red flag. The second one was that he already had a girlfriend at the time, but was telling me, "Hey, we're breaking up." But I was 18 and didn't know any better. And he took advantage of my inexperience and how young I was to manipulate me into this almost Stockholm syndrome like relationship that went on for about 2 years, where every time I would try to break up with him, he would guilt trip me back and would also never directly call me his girlfriend because, like I said, he used me as a homewrecker in 2 separate relationships.
Hmm.
And I didn't know anything. I was just inexperienced. And I was like, hey, this guy is the picture perfect image of what I want in a partner. And then I found out no one's perfect.
Yeah.
And then with the third one, that one was almost like a love at first meet, essentially. But that one was a long distance with someone who just didn't have a good head on their shoulders at the point in time that we were together. And it just was a bad match. And I should have just known better with the extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
But, I was 20, 21. Now I'm about to be 27 and have been in a very happy relationship for the past 5 years of my life.
Yeah. Cutie.
And
Yeah.
I was able to pick and fine comb out the things I really wanted and really did not want.
Yeah, Cutie makes a good point that guys like to pick on women that are very young. Uh, I think it ties into the fact that if you're trying to get into a relationship with someone as a game of winning or losing, right? You're trying to convince them to give you what you want. It's easier to do that when people are inexperienced and you're targeting essentially, like pardon the comparison, but it's like you're targeting weaker prey. And
Yeah.
it's much easier for these guys if they want to act like predators to target the weak and to target the ones who are already more open to that, the ones who are going to actually respond to abuse rather than, an actual healthy relationship. That's why, I mean, there's a running joke, right? Like all these incel guys, they want girls with dad issues
Yeah.
because they want to fill that void. And it is all exactly, Olivia. It's all about power. You want to control things. And I think what that speaks to is you don't feel like you have any control over other areas of your life. You don't feel like you have control
Yeah.
over your career. You don't feel like you have control over how you look. You don't feel like you have control over how much actual authority and power you have. So the one thing you can do is, establish control in a relationship, because that's the easiest thing for other people to look at and be like, oh, they're either doing well or not doing well, right? It's almost like the kind of the comeback joke of like, oh, you get no bitches. Like that's a comeback about any other thing that you sucked at or you're good at, right? Like, oh, I hit challenger in the top rank of every game, and then it was like, oh yeah, but you get no bitches, and it's like it's
Hmm.
completely irrelevant actually, and you also don't know that. But even if they did, it doesn't mean anything if they did, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I guess, do you have any suggestions for guys in terms of like how should they approach women better, just generally?
Absolutely. It does come down to some of the topics that you mentioned in your stream last night of learning to be confident because actions speak a lot louder than words. I can feel when someone is confident around me, man, women, or whatever you identify as, I can feel your confidence. And when you are able to be honest to who you are as a person, then that changes a lot. I found myself from the feminine perspective getting approached by a lot more guys when I finally kind of figured out who I was and accepted who I was. Um, so I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I was a two sport athlete. I am classically trained in two instruments. I was a straight A student all throughout school my entire life, and I have severe anxiety and depression. I'm neurodivergent. I have severe untreated ADHD that was just diagnosed last year. I am a fucking weirdo and I am proud to be a fucking weirdo. And once I truly embodied who I am and my energy, the loud annoyances that people told me I was a show off for, great. I am a show off. If you don't like it, that's not my problem. You don't like me, so you don't like me. I move on. So being able to accept those things that people saw as negatives and embrace them as your own positives, people feel that. People will see that and will go the distance for you by being able to be true to who you are.
Yeah, I mean, Rainbow, you don't mind if they're confident or not. You want them to be themselves. My argument is that someone who really knows themselves and is true to themselves is actually going to come off as pretty confident.
Yep.
I think confidence comes from actually knowing who you are and liking who that is. Like that's what I try to tell people. Most people on Earth are not bad people. That's what I've realized. We see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of demonization of certain beliefs or certain people because they might have differing beliefs than us. And certainly, social media, the media itself, this exaggerates, I guess, belief systems, and it polarizes people because it allows you get more interaction when you're polarizing. You don't get as much interaction staying in the middle, being safe, and kind of playing both sides, right? People want to have something to tie themselves into, and they want to have an enemy. That's
Yeah.
what culture is, and especially in the West. There's a huge push for us to be more and more polarized because we have this inherent trait about, especially I mean I speak mostly about Americans because and probably Europeans, Western Europeans, because we have an interest in things like sports. It's much easier for us to identify in tribalism than it is to try to actually empathize and view things from the other standpoint. But my point about that is because we're so polarized and we're so split on so many different issues, it's all dichotomous, it's all black or white.
Yeah.
Um, we lose the ability to sometimes view other people with differing beliefs as potentially good human beings. They become evil human beings because inherently you want what you're thinking about and your belief system to be on the side of good. Everyone believes that.
Yeah.
Everyone believes that they are sort of on the side of good. And that's impossible if you have differing beliefs. So what I found is that in having conversations with a lot of people, and to be fair, a lot of it online doesn't go the way it should because one, either people aren't able to self-reflect enough to admit when they're wrong or self-reflect enough to even have their own argument figured out which is I see
Like
is
the Twitter convo we were
which
in this morning.
which is the most common thing I see. Like some of these people don't even know their own idea well enough to argue it, much less argue against mine. And that's kind of my approach has been on Twitter is like I will try to understand their argument and bring it up how I think they should have argued it, and it still doesn't even make sense to them. Like it doesn't make it blows my mind. But regardless, I think that a lot of people actually intend the right thing. A lot of people just have the wrong reasoning. So, we like to
Mm.
demonize certain, especially politically, right? I see this all the
Yeah.
time. And it kind of goes with these incel, people, the red pilled people. I don't think they inherently are bad people. I don't think they mean to do bad either. I think that their conclusions that they're drawing are based on premises that don't make any sense and are completely untrue. So even if they drew a logical conclusion from that, it's going to be the wrong conclusion and the wrong, I guess, answer to whatever question they have. Yeah, I think
And
debate should be
I
absolutely should be mandatory. Debate and logic. Logic should be taught.
I absolutely agree with that. I feel like we do need to go back to like the 1700s, 1800s and have like etiquette class and just to learn how to interact with human beings because we've become so reliant on technology. But kind of building off of what you were saying about the red pill incel debate is that they have an extremely narrow, like blinders on point of view and refuse to see anything outside of that.
Hmm.
When you go into something very open minded, you are going to learn a lot and you will learn a lot about yourself. And I feel like that's why especially politics in America are so dangerous because things you're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. If you identify as an independent, no one even pays attention to you. But this was a topic that I was talking about on my stream is that because of this dichotomy that you're mentioning with things being black and white, there are going to be things that Republicans disagree with that are Republican. There are going to be things that Democrats disagree with that are Democratic. But inevitably, because we are a two-party system, you have to pick Democrats or Republicans, and you have to accept the good with the bad. Humans are the exact same way. You're going to find that people say things that you agree with, and then there are going to be things that you disagree with. But that's just the nature of things,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can't avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, let's kind of get back to the idea of like, okay, well, for young men right now, obviously this is a confusing time because there's so much going on. It's much easier to identify with other men that you see as strong than to identify with men you see as weak. Now, I know that inherently, if you believe in the stereotypical masculine view of what a man is, of course you're gonna have a harder time empathizing and identifying with the group that is trying to espouse, LGBTQ rights, trans rights, all that stuff, um, like actually respecting women, like all that stuff comes off as stereotypically weak. And then the stuff that comes off as stereotypically strong is I have a lot of muscles, I can fight people really well, I'm hyper violent, I never listen to anyone. Like these over hyperbolic views of what masculinity means. So, how does a young person, in your mind, I guess, come to peace or come to terms with being okay with all of that?
Um, I think here's a very cliche answer, but you just have to grow up. You have to experience different things. You have to win. You have to lose. You have to get knocked down. You have to win. You have to celebrate. You have to mourn. You have to create. You need to be able these different energies and you need to be at one end of the spectrum and then to the complete opposite other end of the spectrum and then you got to be on the crossing spectrum. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable so you can learn and build and create yourself to be another person, or a better person. And I feel like because of these young people in the generation following this red pill mentality, they're so stuck on that they won't allow themselves to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable is the most important thing in order to learn.
Yeah, I agree with that. Being vulnerable is really, really hard. Um, it
Yeah.
took me a lot of time, years of really trying to think about it, and therapy, talked to a therapist for a while, talked to a life coach, I talked to a psychiatrist, like all these people, right? And I talked to just other people who aren't even professionals, especially women. Actually, I found that I've gotten a lot better at being vulnerable by talking to women about how to approach it. And it's
Yeah.
because I think about it like at the end of the day, we're all human. And vulnerability is something that women find much easier in our society to be comfortable with than men. And so, who better to talk about it to talk about it with than women? And obviously, it's different. I think it'd be impossible for me to get to the state I'm at now in terms of being comfortable with my vulnerability if I hadn't talked to men about it. I
Yeah.
mean, women kind of opened the door for how to think about it and made it seem like, okay, this is not something that's going to lessen me in the view of other women, right? And I think that's a
Hmm.
lot of what men are afraid of is not so much vulnerability around other men. They're actually more concerned about women seeing them as weak for being vulnerable. I found that in the military, in fraternity, men are very actually willing to open up and be vulnerable around other men. Even though a lot of people don't think they are, the second they get into a a situation in which they're allowed to be vulnerable, men tend to be more okay with being vulnerable around other men much quicker than if a woman were to ask them to be vulnerable.
I es- so there was a comment just made in your chat about a
Yeah.
lot of people don't like when you're vulnerable. There is a very fine line between being vulnerable and being a leech.
Yeah.
What I mean
Yeah,
by
the
that is being able
situational for
to
sure
open
matters.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's being able
Context
to open
matters.
up about your emotions and
Yeah.
being honest to yourself.
Yeah.
Honesty is very close to
Yeah.
vulnerability in this sort of
Yeah.
sense. Being honest is what's important. Being a leech and relying on someone to be your outlet is bad. And there is
Yeah.
a very fine line.
Hey, Yasuke, hey, welcome, man. I agree with you. I agree with you. I don't think that being vulnerable all the time, well, let's back up. I don't think being vulnerable in the way that people describe being vulnerable all the time is a good thing. I
Exactly.
think being vulnerable in the way that I think of vulnerable, which is being honest with yourself, that should be appropriate anywhere. It depends on how you act. It doesn't mean that I need to go and put my emotions out there online all the time, but it means that I need to be constantly vulnerable with myself, meaning that I have to take conscious effort throughout the day to understand what my motivations are, why am I thinking this, why am I feeling this way, and acknowledge it rather than kind of suppressing it all the time unless I'm in the one setting in which I can let it out. A lot of
Yeah.
men have a hard time with bottling things up, and I think that's a big part of it. Like I think of vulnerability as being honest with yourself. That's all. If you want to be openly vulnerable with someone else, that's another story. There's a time and a place for that for sure. I'm not gonna open up to any random person that like just wants to. I mean, actually, I lie. I'll open up to pretty much anyone. Like
Same.
especially at this point, right? Like on stream and all that stuff. Especially because I've come to peace with a lot of my stuff, right? I've come to peace with a lot of the issues I used to have, a lot of the insecurities I used to have, and it doesn't bother me anymore. If you're just starting to be vulnerable with yourself and you're just starting to understand yourself at that level, you probably shouldn't be coming out to other people with it until you're really ready for it. And I also agree with Step. Like the people that don't want you to be vulnerable around them, you got to think about why. They're either uncomfortable with it, which highly indicates that they're probably not very vulnerable or aware of themselves anyway, and they're not going to give
Hmm.
you good advice, or they truly don't care about you that much. You
Or it's
know?
not the right place
Yeah, that
or
too.
the right time.
But I'm saying under the idea that okay, it's the right setting, right? Like it's one on one,
Hmm.
and you're both sober or something. Like if that's the situation, and they don't want you to tell them how you feel, they don't want to know how you feel. They're not really your friend, and they don't really care about you because they
I'm
don't.
going to
Yeah,
counterpoint that real quick. it could be that they're also experiencing something right now that they cannot withstand being vulnerable at this point in time for you.
That's fair. Yeah. Now maybe they have their own shit they're dealing with. Also,
Exactly.
hey, legit Korea, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome everybody.
Hello, legit Korea
Big
raid.
fan. I hope you had some good games today. We're not playing games right now. I'm actually just talking with Maya, my friend, my Maya Jillian, and we're just discussing positive masculinity, thoughts about, men and women in society, and, ways that maybe some men could be influenced to be healthier people in the long term. But yeah, we were just talking about vulnerability and men kind of needing to understand that there's a spectrum of vulnerability, and a lot of times we are skewed from both directions. It has to do with that polarization that we talked about. Yeah, fuck toxic masculinity, exactly. But you don't have to be one way or the other, right? I like to think that like the red pilled incel people like to push you so hard into like don't feel anything unless it's anger and like unless it's like rage or don't acknowledge the fact that you might actually have a lot of issues yourself that you have to figure out. And then the other side is like, oh, you need to go and cry all the time in front of people. It has to be somewhere in the middle, right? Like most things in life, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I
Yeah.
think that unless you acknowledge yourself and how you feel and who you are and are honest with yourself, then there's no way you could actually be good or helpful for anyone else. Like you have to actually understand that. And that's what I mean by vulnerability. It doesn't mean crying on stream. It doesn't mean telling every single person all of your trauma and history and all that stuff. It's just knowing that at the end of the day, you have to be happy with yourself, and you're not going to be happy with yourself if you're lying to yourself. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Anger is an emotion. And I don't want to, the other thing is, I don't want to demonize anger. I think there's a time and a place for anger. I
Absolutely.
think anger is actually a very important emotion, just like any other emotion. Anger can motivate, anger can stimulate you to change something. I mean, anger is, it's a powerful emotion, but like most powerful emotions, there's a cost to it. People who are heavily in love, there's a cost to that. It's the same thing. These are very powerful emotions, jealousy, all that stuff. But you absolutely should not. Yeah, Yasuo, that's a perfect way to put it. That has to talk. That's a big concept in Stoicism. Is not there's a misconception that Stoics are people who don't feel emotion. It's just not true.
That's not
Stoics,
possible.
yeah, Stoics or ignore emotions. Stoics are people who acknowledge their emotions and then decide if this emotion is something they want to I guess affect their life, or is it something they don't want to affect their life, so they act in a way that isn't a response to the emotion itself. You're always trying to act in a way that comes from a place of logic and rationality to know that you're going to go to where you want to be because you're doing this. You don't want emotions to dictate your actions. Exactly. That's a really, really succinct way to put it.
I think a really good example, not in the relationship or dating sphere, but I was let go from my previous job after they put me in a really toxic setting and then said that I was the problem. And I was so angry after it happened.
Yeah.
But then once I realized I was angry, I said to myself, okay, I'm angry. Now what can I do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I started working out. I picked up new hobbies. I immediately started to look for a new job, and the new job that I started working with gave me a $10,000 raise, a $5,000 sign-on bonus, and 3 weeks of time off. And I
Yeah.
never would have gotten that if I did not get angry and decide to make myself better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely accomplished a lot of things in my life because I was angry about something. Like
Yep.
that's for sure. It's for sure a thing. Like, and something I've worked on with my therapist too is like, you can't always negatively motivate yourself either, though. You kind of have to find a balance
Yeah.
because there's a time in which, you beating yourself up, you being angry all the time. Again, like I said, there's a consequence to that, so you have to find a balance in how you motivate yourself. You have to find balance in doing certain things because you're upset about something that happened, doing certain things because you have hope or it makes you joyful to do it, doing certain things that are just, things that you feel are valuable for yourself. Like there's so many ways to go about it. It's not a right or wrong thing, but we shouldn't shy away from anger. We shouldn't think that, oh, because I'm angry, I'm doing something wrong, because then that leads to guilt. Now, guilt
Yeah.
is the one emotion that I have a lot of issues with sort of being okay with. Oh yeah, I also forgot. I'm gonna shout out my friend
It's
Legit.
okay. Don't worry about it. I'm moderating your stream at the same time.
I was just shout out Legit Creates You for the raid. Thank you so much, buddy. Um, but you know, you have to understand the consequence of being angry all the time is that you are more prone to be angry with things that you shouldn't be angry about. I find that a lot of times, like most habits and traits that we have as people, the more often you do something, the more likely you are to do it. Right? It's like a
Yeah.
feed forward mechanism. If you're constantly reacting to things by getting angry, you're more likely to react to most events in your life through anger. And similarly, if you're constantly falling into deep depression from things, you're more likely to feel that as well when things may not be worthy of that deep of an emotion. Now, depression and all that stuff, and even anger to some degree, there's definitely some physiologic and contribution to that, right? Like our neurochemistry changes, and sometimes people are chemically depressed. But
That's
there,
me.
yeah, I mean, there's obviously medication that can help with that, but it always has to be in conjunction with psychology and actually learning the tools that you can use to mentally pull yourself out of those ruts. You know, like you have the chemical balance, but you know the thing is, if you chemically induce a balance in your brain, it doesn't make you not depressed. That's the thing. You
I
will
couldn't agree more.
you are chemically not depressed anymore, but you are still depressed. Why? Because depression is a multifaceted issue. It's not that you were just sad or you are lacking a certain chemical. It's a multifaceted issue involving your view on your own life and your tendencies on how you view things. So until you
Yeah.
change that, you're never not going to be depressed because of a pill.
Yeah, and that was something I have probably been trying to figure out for the past 12 to 15 years of my life. I was always super depressed from once I started getting like viciously bullied around the age of 10 all the way up through college.
Mhm.
I want to say around the age of probably around the age of 24, around the time I was finishing PT school,
You're back.
I met with a psychiatrist and I said, "Hey, I have all of these circumstances that make me happy. I'm in
Mhm.
a relationship, I have a house, I have a job, I have a loving family. I am no longer depressed, but why am I still depressed?" And that's when I decided to look for medications because I changed environmental factors, I changed psychological factors, I changed all these other things before I went to medications. And
Yeah.
I feel like what Cutie Kitten said there, like you took antidepressants and they numbed you out, but the
Mhm.
internal environmental issues still happened. That's the problem. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm depressed. Let me just turn to medications," and then don't change anything else.
Yeah.
Whereas I took the opposite approach. I changed everything else around me, but I was still depressed. As soon as I went on medication, I've had bouts of depression, but
Mhm.
in the past 2 years that I've been on it, I've had four actual like bouts of like 3 day depression, and that's it. So that was a true chemical imbalance.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, and there's times when it is more like what I always use the comparison of like a pie, right? And I
Mm,
use this with the pain scale a lot. There's times when it's more chemical. There's times when it's more situational. Like, is it sort of normal to feel some depression when you lose your job, you get laid off, or you have someone break up with you from a long-term relationship? Yeah, yeah. I think that's totally reasonable that you would feel some of those feelings. Is it a chemical thing? I mean, to some degree, yes, because if you believe in just the way that neurophysiology works, yeah, it is. But it's not the same as someone who has a chemical depression over a long period of time.
yeah.
But I'm not a psychologist. Let's get that clear. So I'm not going to dive too much into this. The things that I try to focus on that it's not like trying to treat depression or treat someone who is suffering from depression. Control what you can control, right? If you have
Yeah.
depression, control what you can control. You can control the medication potentially. You can control your actions in terms of going and talking to people for professional help. And then the other thing you can sort of control and you can start taking charge of is your conscious reaction to things that occur in your life.
Bingo.
And that's really, really hard for people because you have to first acknowledge that maybe your gut reaction, your initial reaction, may not be the one that you want. So, for example, let's say you get laid off, right? and it came out of nowhere. You had no idea why this is coming. The company downsized, whatever. The first reaction is I'm very mad. I'm upset or I'm depressed, right? Like, okay, these are things that this is something I have no control over and I feel wronged. The universe has screwed me over. And that's natural and it's okay to feel that. But if you then start to attribute that idea to you feeling a different way about your whole persona in your life, like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm doomed. I'm going to, like die poor and jobless and all these other things. You're actually negatively influencing your ability to change out of that position. And it's really hard. It's really hard for people. And I hear this all the time. Like, if you're depressed, you can't do anything, right? Of course, it's hard to do it. And that's what the medication is supposed to do, is to get you to the point where you can do something about it. But at the end of the day, you have to. And there's nothing else. No one else can make you do something until you decide to do it. And it kind of sounds like I'm just telling people to just get over it, but it's not really that. It's more so that you have to realize at the end of the day, you have to do it for yourself and you have to make the decision. No one can make a decision for you. And so until you decide in that scenario to get up and go look for a job, you're not going to find a job.
Yeah.
It's not going to fall in your lap. And what a lot of people have found in the world of psychology, stuff like that, is that sometimes starting to do action, try to take on action, it relieves a lot of the stress in your mind that's building up because you're not doing anything.
That's why people go to the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. The gym is a really good example of one way to start a healthier habit that kickstarts other healthier habits.
And I want to kind of bring back around to the topic with everything that you just said when it comes to toxic versus positive masculinity. Um, I find that a lot of the people that, exude toxic masculinity believe that men are not allowed to feel depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not allowed to say, I'm depressed and I need help, because they view themselves as weak if they say, oh, I'm depressed, but I'm a guy and I have this and I've got money and I've got cars and I'm hot, but I'm depressed. And
Yeah.
they are not allowed to feel that. And that is such bullshit.
Yeah.
You're allowed to be depressed. I don't care what your color is. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what you identify as. You're allowed to be depressed and you're allowed to feel it. And no one else is allowed to tell you otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I also, again, sort of a personal philosophy of mine, though, is that you can only be there for so long before you have to pull yourself out of it. Because at the end of the day, like, the life that you want to live is dependent on what you do. And you were responsible for that. So, it's okay to feel depressed and it's okay to acknowledge and experience those emotions, but you can't stay there, because the only person it's going to hurt is you in the long run, right? People are going to leave, you're going to reduce the opportunities that you have in life to actually get the life you want, all that stuff. And defaulting to action is something that I always try to lean into. It's about, you gotta find some way to kickstart some sort of motion. Yeah, absolutely. Depression is not just being sad. It's a inability to find motivation, I think, and an inability to see things as being good or that things can change for the better. And that's pervasive. It goes across everything.
I think another part of that is people don't want to accept that they are depressed either. They'll just say, oh, I'm really sad, it'll get better.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't identify it as depression. And as you said, depression does not equal sadness and vice versa. So being able to identify, hey, this is the emotion, this is the state of being that I'm currently in, and not trying to trick yourself into thinking you're someone or feeling something else is much healthier than trying to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. That being said, caveat, like, talk to a professional if you're having issues. Yes. Please go get therapy. Even if you don't feel like you're depressed, it's helpful. Like, it's helpful to just kind of work on those things. I think of everything as a tool, right? Like, the tools that you have to manage your mental health are similar to the tools that you have in managing your physical health, and that you can train these things. There are techniques and strategies that you can learn and practice and get better at that will make it so that you are less likely to have maladaptive thought processes when things occur. Like Lakeville Pod, you said it's a certain neural pathway that becomes pervasive because your attention to seek info, learn, and protect yourself. I mean, I also think it actually physically creates connections that are going to be used more and more, the more often you use it. Again, it's that idea that the more often you think a certain way, the more often you go through a certain mental process, the faster it is for your brain to do that, and the more likely it is to do that automatically. So in
Absolutely.
the same way that you've sort of, well, I say you, some people have trained themselves to react negatively to every experience, and you probably all have friends like that. They will constantly just talk down about themselves. They'll constantly be self-deprecating. They'll constantly say any little bad thing that happens, oh yeah, this is just my life. Everything goes to shit. Everything always fucks me over. Like there are people like that in everybody's life. Like that can actually feed forward. Like I found that my friends, and I've had a very wide range of friends. My best friends from like high school, one of them was dealing with a lot of shit and like, homeless at one point and like had all this stuff happen just bang, bang, bang at one after the other. And a lot of what he talked about was like, hey, I'm so unlucky. I have all this stuff happen. His life has gotten much better lately. And I think the biggest change that I've seen in him is that while he's sometimes still self-deprecating, he talks about those things differently now. He mentions a
Mm-hmm.
lot about how, oh, this shitty thing happened, but like it's cool because I'm doing this other thing, or I still can make the most out of this, or I can make this actually a positive. And that's something that I never have heard him talk about before. And I don't know, correspondingly, like his life's gotten a lot better. A lot more good things have happened to him now. And I don't call it like energy. I don't like the idea that if you will something into existence, it will come to you, right? What's that called? The law of attraction or some bullshit? No,
Manifesting.
manifesting. Yeah. I think it's ridiculous. It's not magic. It's the fact that when you view outcomes as being potentially positive, you are more likely to think about solutions and moves that will achieve that outcome more readily. You're actually going to subconsciously approach everything that you do differently because you think that, hey, this is probably going to end well and you're going to do better at all those things. It's really, I
Yeah.
mean, we know this in League, right? Anyone who plays League knows that when you are, you're tilted and all you're doing is talking shit on yourself, you very rarely then pop off and play even better.
Yeah.
When you're like, okay, this game is super winnable. I just need to get like I need to finish this item and I'm going to be ready to fight. We should actually turn this around. A lot of times those are the games that you swing from like 10K gold down because everyone on the team views success as a potential possibility. And so they start playing like it. Similarly, I've lost so many games from 10K gold up where my whole team, because we lost one fight, now views the game as lost. And we literally throw the entire lead over the next 20 minutes. And it's just because one or two players decided, hey, this is not winnable. Even if they're playing the game, the decisions they're making, the way they're playing, it
Mm-hmm.
reflects that they're not interested in winning anymore. They're actually playing kind of to lose. Because at the end, like everything that we have control over is going to reflect the mindset we went into it with. If you think you're going to lose, you're more likely going to lose.
Yep.
And that affects everything. I use League as a comparison to life a lot because there's a lot of real life lessons with the solo queue experience. Yeah,
And
visualization is super powerful.
I'm sure you've seen very, very similar presentations, Jordan, when treating people with chronic pain.
Yeah.
And I find that I learn a lot from individuals that struggle with chronic pain because they are in pain, a lot of pain for long periods of time. They have such negative points of view and don't put themselves in any sort of situation that they're not used to, even if it could give them a more positive response.
Yeah.
So I find myself talking with patients that have chronic pain a lot more than I do the general population. We'll do maybe 3 or 4 exercises compared to 10 to 15, just picking random numbers out of the air because that's what they need.
Hmm.
And by being able to put yourself into a scenario where you can get better is hard when you're used to being stuck in a certain cycle and you just don't know any better. But being not necessarily being able to, but trying, putting effort towards changing your mindset will absolutely change your life.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, on that note, I'm probably gonna switch gears to going back to this Daily Stoic. But thank you for dropping by the stream, Maya. Really appreciate your time,
Absolutely.
your insight. I hope people got something out of basically learning a little bit about this stuff from someone who actually is on the other side of it, right? Like women experiencing what men do. I think it's super interesting to get both sides, and definitely that's something that we should try to do more in life is understand the other side of anything. Thank you so much for the anonymous gift. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you, Maya. Have a good
Of
rest of your stream.
course. Yeah, I'll probably only be live for like the next 15 minutes. I'll probably play an ARAM, scream about it, and then go to bed
There
because
you
I
go.
have to work at 9 a.m. And I'm on the East Coast, so
Oh, okay.
here
Yeah,
I
that's right. I
am.
was gonna say that's so early, that's so late.
No, it is about to be 11 o'clock.
Got it. Got it. All right. Well, have a good night then. Take care. Thanks for
All
dropping
right,
by.
Jordan. It's been a pleasure.
Always.
Goodbye, Jordan Stream.
All right, guys. So cool. Really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Maya's she's cool. She's awesome. So check her out. She plays a lot of League, but she's also a doctor of physical therapy. I think she's used to do like PT Thursdays or something like that, where she does consults as well. But yeah, a really good one. So I kind of wanted to continue with the series I was doing on Stoicism with the book, The Daily Stoic. Let me change the stream title real quick. Daily Stoic discussion. And so we're going to go through another passage here, another quote, this time from one of my favorites, the GOAT, Marcus Aurelius. And then we'll talk about what it means and then give you some real world examples and then maybe talk about some application, applicability towards real life. And that's always the goal when I talk about Stoicism is what are the takeaways for real life? That's really the best kind of philosophy in my opinion. Stuff that actually changes how you approach how you live. Yeah, thank you, Maya. Take care. All right, so here's the quote. Marcus Aurelius. All you need are these. Certainty of judgment in the present moment, action for the common good in the present moment, and an attitude of gratitude in the present moment for anything that comes your way. So, what does that mean? Perception, action, will. Those are the three overlapping but critical disciplines of Stoicism, as well as the organization of this book and the year-long journey we've just begun. There's more to the philosophy, certainly, but we could spend all day talking about unique beliefs of the various Stoics. This is what Heraclitus thought. This is Zeno was from Citium, and blah, blah, blah. But would such facts really help you day to day? What clarity does trivia provide? Nothing. So the following little reminder sums up the three most essential parts of Stoic philosophy worth carrying with you every day into every decision. Control your perceptions, direct your actions properly, willingly accept what's outside your control. That's all you need to do. So this ties into a lot of what already came up in discussion today, right? Number one, control your perceptions. What that means is understand the inherent biases that you might hold and understand the inherent biases that what is being shown to you might come through. In the case of like these guys who are kind of in that mindset of like I need to be an alpha male, top G, whatever. The perception is heavily skewed towards being, I guess, what we would cartoonize as a man, right? It's a hyperbole of a man. It's a man, it's someone who's large and loud and angry and hairy and like muscular, gets all the women. Like it's a characterization. It's heavily, heavily biased. It doesn't mean every man is like that, right? So your perception of what you see when it comes into you, it needs to be screened. It needs to be analyzed. And then control your own perceptions of that as well, right? Like, I also don't want to go to the extreme of saying, well, that's not what I believe is a man, so therefore that is bad either. I know some, very nice, I don't want to use the word nice. I just have very good people who are large, muscular, get a lot of women, all that stuff. But deep down, they're actually pretty good people as well. So it's not to say that that idea is inherently bad and we need to be the opposite, but rather that that's not the only way that you can be a man and still be masculine. I think that a lot of these people like to portray being an actually good person as somehow weak. Like being a good person can feel weak because a lot of times you feel like you've been taken advantage of. You're not the one winning in a lot of scenarios. People who cheat and rip people off, they tend to make it, right? They tend to get a lot of what we want in life, which is money, power, fame, whatever. But it doesn't make you weak to be good. It makes you stronger because you have to deal with the consequence of being good sometimes. You have to just bite the bullet for basically telling someone, hey, you paid me too much change and here's $20 back. That it's not weakness. That's strength because you're willing to accept the consequence. Weakness is just acknowledging that you would rather take what's easy, even if you know it's wrong, and just accept it because it's easier to be like that. But in the end, you also get a little pang of guilt with it, right? You're a bit of a sociopath if you do something that you know is intentionally wrong and you don't feel any guilt. And guilt builds up. Like there's just like I was talking about other habits. If you're consistently making a decision that brings on guilt, you're going to be more likely to continue to make decisions like that. And that leads to a cascade of bad decisions in the long run. And that's why you see a lot of people just kind of fall down this path of like always making the worst possible move, is that they never understood that their perception of what is right and wrong is inherently flawed, and they just need to change that. And this brings us up to the second part of this passage, which is direct your actions properly. Direct your actions properly. You can't know how to direct your actions unless you have a good understanding of your intent. And this is something I've talked about before too, of you have to know what it is you actually want, and you have to know what it actually is going to make you happy in order to determine what your proper action should be. If you don't know what you want, then how could you possibly do something efficiently to get you there? Do I journal? I don't journal as much as I should. I do try to on occasion, but it's something I've definitely fallen off the last couple of weeks. I made a goal to try to journal like every day, and that's clearly fallen off. But I need to get back to it. Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, it's something I do. And journaling is hard. So here's a tip I have for journaling. As a guy who doesn't tend to like to document my feelings very much, I spend a lot of time acknowledging my feelings and then kind of moving on from that. Because once I've acknowledged what I feel, I'm pretty good about determining, is this how I want to feel or not? And then taking necessary steps to change that if need be. But the way that I've journaled that I found very helpful for me is just doing a gratitude journal. And it kind of ties into what Scald was saying, the attitude of gratitude. What I would write down is, hey, here's everything good that happened today. Here's everything that I think I did well. And that's it. I don't even put the negative stuff. I just write down all the good things that have gone on in my life recently. And I do it super simply. I just write in bullet points a lot of times. I put a plus and I'll put like all the good things that have happened that day. And that's it. It takes me a minute, 30 seconds, which is why I'm like actually kind of disappointed that I haven't done it. But it's the easiest, littlest thing you can do that reminds you at the end of every day, hey, look at all these things that happened that was actually good today. And it forces you in doing so to revisit each of those incidents, right? Like full energy. The cashier gave you extra money. Like, great. I tried to, say you returned it. Great. I received extra money. I returned it. I felt pretty good about that. If you got extra money, you're like, I didn't even notice I walked out. It's fine. Hey, it's my lucky day. I found money, right? That's something positive that happened to you. You write that down and you think about it later. Like, that's something that doesn't happen very often and is definitely lucky. And then we realize when we do that every single day There are multiple things that happen to us that we're pretty lucky. And that's very powerful because I think a lot of times when people are depressed, it's also the idea that nothing good ever happens to them. And in reminding yourself every day that, hey, these are things that I distinctly remembered enough to write down, that these are a lot of good things that happened to me today, or these are things that are going well in my life. I would write things like, hey, I met someone interesting today, which is, that's lucky. That's a blessing. You know, like how often do you get to meet someone actually interesting? And I may never talk to them again, but it's something something positive that did happen, right? I met one new patient that I actually really like. Uh, is that what practice gratitude means? I think it needs a retitle then if it includes like, oh, hey, I did a good thing. Why? I think you should be grateful for the opportunity to do good things. Like, it's not about being grateful. To me, doesn't mean that you are owed something, right? Like if someone does something good for me and I'm grateful to them, I don't owe them anything. I'm grateful. It's a feeling of I appreciate that this happened. So I think of it, if you did a good thing, you should by all means celebrate that you had an opportunity to do something good. For you, your depression comes loneliness and feeling like you'll be forgotten. Yeah, yeah. Well, we can talk about that, right? Loneliness and feeling like you'll be forgotten are two very different things, although they're very intimately related. I think a lot of, I'll be honest, I'm very lonely right now. And now I'm being super candid and vulnerable on stream. But I'm pretty lonely right now because I came, it's been, 6 months since me and my ex-wife split. This is the longest I haven't been around someone like 24/7, like the majority of my day, in years. Like we were dating for 7 years and we lived together for four plus. So this is the longest it's been in like almost a decade where I haven't had someone around me. And even before I was dating her, I was living with roommates. This is the first time in my life I've lived by myself, and it's just me and Kumi. So there's like an inherent loneliness to that. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that what it means is me and everyone else who is experiencing loneliness needs to find a way to come to peace with being alone. And that's hard. It's hard to come to peace with being alone. And I don't mean just like distracting yourself, right? Like, of course I could play video games and I'm not going to be bored. I'm not going to feel that loneliness as much, but it's still there. I think truly coming to peace with it means that you're okay with it being that way for now. And part of that comes from knowing that it's not always going to be like that. Like you're not alone forever. You're alone right now. And that's just true. But the loneliness feeling sort of stems from the idea that you may not ever find someone to be with. And honestly, like you kind of have to tell yourself that that's just not true. That's objectively false. At some point, you're going to be around someone else, right? So that feeling is based on a false reality. Now, feeling like you'll be forgotten, that's a tough one. That's something I've struggled a lot with. Ever since I was a kid, I thought it was my mission to change the world. I wanted to be Alexander the Great because I never wanted to be forgotten in history. Everything I've done in the back of my mind has had some influence of me wanting to change history, me wanting to be remembered forever. I had this weekend, actually, I was talking to some of my friends and I posed a philosophical question of if you were given the opportunity to make a one-way trip to Mars tomorrow and you're not coming back, would you do it? And almost all of them said no. They're like, no, dude, you're going to go and die out there. And I was like, yeah, but you would be one of the first humans from Earth to ever go to Mars. The sacrifice is the rest of your life. What you would gain is that you would be in history forever. And they all said no, like 3 guys. They all said no. And I was like, I would hands down go. Like tomorrow. I would drop everything here. Because that's that's just always been in the back of my mind. And I don't think anything I can do on Earth is going to equate to the magnitude of what I would be doing if I did that. I don't even think it's not even about survival. It literally, I'm saying that it's not about colonizing. It's not about starting life or anything. It's about going to Mars and dying out there. Like, you are going to go to Mars. You're going to get out. You're going to do some tests and all that. And then you're going to die out there alone or with your team. Right. Like, yeah. And that's, that's a fundamental difference, I think, philosophically, with how my brain works and how my approach to life is compared to most people. Let's have a movie night. Yeah, I mean, I'm down. Let's definitely try to do some more social stuff with the Discord and stuff like that. I'm not even talking about AdMech. I have no opinion on it. I've never played them. What's my view on death? That's a that's a really deep question, but I have a few different thoughts on it. Death is something that occurs to everyone. It's inescapable, it's unavoidable, and it's not something to be feared. How we die is something that you might want to fear. But I personally have accepted death a long time ago. And I know a lot of people say that, but legitimately, I think when I was in Iraq and the first time I got blown up, it was the ID went off right behind my truck, blew up the truck behind me. I was the lead truck, so they were trying to hit us. We evac'd, everyone got out, it was fine. You know, I spent a few days at BIOP, which is Baghdad International Airport, just on base, like just kind of recovering from it. And it was right before I was supposed to go home. I was supposed to go on leave for 3 weeks the next week. I'd been in Iraq for 9 months at this point. Nothing had happened. It was the most boring fucking tour of all time. I was losing my mind. I'm like, I'm never going to see any action. I'm going to go home and I'm not going to be able to tell anyone anything. And I'm like, I was going through all these ideas about how I wasn't really a soldier. Nothing is real. Like, why am I even here? And then I get blown up, right? Like, the ID blows up, you know, fucks up our truck. I had this picture of it where the entire tire was ripped off, like windshield is cracked, all this stuff. The gunner's bleeding out of both of his ears. I remember in that split second, it was like a light switch for me. They always say like time slows down. It's not so much that time slows down. Your brain starts to operate at an insanely fast rate. And in the split second that the explosion went off, after I'd processed what had just happened, I immediately went through training stuff, right? Like, okay, we need to push out 300 meters. We need to check casualty call. I called up on the radio to check in on it if anyone was hurt because I was the medic. And immediately resolved the situation. And then like that split second though, I realized that everything from this point on is like bonus time. Like I could have died or I was close enough to something that would have irrevocably changed my life and my family's, like everybody's that I know, and it would have ended my story right there, but it didn't. So everything after that is free. It was so, I don't know what the word is. It was so liberating because after that, nothing ever felt like it was nearly as consequential as that moment. You know, like I'll never ever have a feeling like that again. And it's true. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Fight Club, but having a near, what Tyler Durden calls a near life experience changes everything. The quote that I love from that movie is, so the story is, I don't know if you guys have seen Fight Club. I don't want to get too much in it, but his character pulls a gun out. He grabs this like attendant at a gas station, pulls him out, puts a gun on him. He's like, "Oh, give me all your money. Give me all the shit." He like robs him. He's like, "All right, get out of here. Go home. You know, like, live your life. Go back to school. Get out of this fucking job. Go do what you want to do." And he runs off terrified. And Edward Norton's character is like, "Dude, what are you doing? You're insane." And, you know, Tyler Durden's like, "Hey, tomorrow he's going to wake up and the bowl of cereal that he eats is the best fucking cereal he's ever had. He's going to live his life so much more fully and do everything he actually wants to do because he almost lost it all and didn't even have the opportunity to do it." And I think although that's an extreme example, it's the same mentality and the same kind of light switch moment for me when that happened, that I accepted that death can come at any time and it's not something we should fear. We should live our life. If death happens, it happens. But the real regret is you didn't live your life fully enough before you died. Because this is the opportunity that you're given. And you don't know how much time you have. And that's another concept in Stoicism that I talk about, the memento mori. Everybody dies. So live your life to the fullest that you can, so that when you inevitably have to die, you don't look back and wish that you had done things completely differently. You know, regret's not an emotion I believe in very strong. I don't regret things because I try to think in the present about how my decisions are influencing the future. And then are my decisions in line with how I want to live my life? If you're living in a way that's not concordant with your view on life, you're inherently going to be less happy and you're probably going to regret the life you live when you die. Have I seen the posters? No, I haven't. That would drive you nuts. I'm a big regretter. I mean, it wouldn't drive me nuts. That's something you have to figure out. That's something you have to deal with. Regret is not an emotion I want. I don't talk about a lot of negative emotions too much, but regret is one that I consider a negative emotion because regret indicates that in the past, you acted or made a decision in a manner that is not in concordance with your current life and what you wanted to be. So you regret it because you view it as something that you decided incorrectly on. You should not regret making a decision during a time in which that was the best course of action and it just didn't go well. You can't regret that. Like true regret is making a decision that you knew was wrong and it turned out to be wrong and you regret it because you know you made a mistake. Have I read The Myth of Sisyphus? Actually, somebody else recommended that to me, but I haven't. I know The Myth of Sisyphus, but I've never read the book. Somebody was talking about that. Oh, it was actually this really interesting girl I met on a plane. And it's so random that you bring that up. Because yesterday I was talking about, hey, what's up, Dragon Names? Yesterday we were talking about how to talk to women. And I said, my example was, if you see something about them that you can relate to them on, or you can find some topic of conversation, it's a good way to open a conversation. And that's what this was. This girl was reading another book called, oh my God, I'm blanking. It's about an ape. The story of, oh my God, I'm blanking. This is, I'm going to look it up. It's book about thinking ape. Ishmael. That's what it was. Ishmael. I read it in high school. No, not the story B. Ishmael. This girl sitting next to me on the plane. She was cute. That's why I was interested in talking to her anyway. But she was reading Ishmael, and I glanced at it, and I didn't talk to her right away. You know, I was like, okay, she's reading Ishmael. That's cool. So I was sitting there watching my movie, and like halfway through the flight, I started talking to her about Ishmael. I was like, oh, that's a really good book. How are you liking it? You know, that struck up a conversation. Yo, Step 1v9, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back, Step. Nice to see you again. I hope you had a good stream. But she brought up after the book, The Myth of Sisyphus, and said, oh, you should read this next. That's where that came from. But yeah, it was interesting because like that was a case in which my intent was to get to know her. I didn't actually want to get her number, date her, or anything. I didn't even know her, but I thought she was pretty. Just wanted to get to know her. And like I said before, I view a lot of that stuff. I view a lot of that stuff as practice. And it sounds weird, but it's literally practice. You don't get good at talking. You don't get good at anything you do in life without practice. And I view sort of being conversational with people as practice. Yeah, you meant to watch that discussion. Keep getting in League games. No worries, man. I understand the addiction. No, but yeah, your stream is more directed around that, and I'm sure your community wants to see you smashing some people on Tryndamere. So, yours might be more related to OCD and anxiety diagnosis. I don't want to talk too much about the neurodivergent diagnoses because I only know a little bit about ADHD, but I'm not a psychologist again. But Yeah. Anyway, I've really digressed. That's my ADHD. I wanted to continue talking about the idea of death itself and like whether or not we should fear death. And I don't think we should fear death. Like I said, we should fear how we die, and we should fear that death will result in regret. We should fear regret. But that's the funny thing about regret is it's the most controllable emotion, because not because you choose not to feel it. You can make decisions that are in line with your character and who you want to be so that you never experience regret. I almost never ever ever experience regret, because every decision I make, I think about, is this in line with who I am? And at the end of it, right, when everything is said and done, and I look back on mistakes I've made, I don't regret them, because I made the decision to the best of my ability given the information at hand, and it was in line with who I am. Religion is a nice escape from fear of death. It can be, but it also, that's a really hard one for me because I'm not religious. And if you use religion as an escape from the fear of death, you have to fully believe in the faith of the religion. And I'll be honest, that's hard for a lot of people. They might be religious, they might go to church, they might do all these things, but to truly say that they have faith that they are going to heaven at an intuitive, intrinsic level, that's hard. That's really hard, because those same people are going to have a hard time actually dying. Like, when they're like, you're thinking about this while tripping the other day, it's the best time to think about it. It's practice from being religious, but I'm saying like imagine back in the day, right? Like Crusades, everyone was dying for their religion. How many of them do you think went quietly and said, I accept death and I'm ready to die? Very few. That's why those that did were remembered. The vast majority of religious people died screaming like everyone else, terrified of death. They didn't want it. Because even practicing religion, it doesn't mean that you're going to actually be able to have that view when the time comes. So if you can do that, great. If you can't do that, I don't like to think of it as like the only solution. I think that if you live life in concordance with who you want to be as a person, then death should not be as feared in general, because it's inevitable. Whether or not you feel regret during death is a matter of perspective, like your perspective at that point in time. Yes. But I'm saying that you are less likely to feel regret when you die if your whole life has been lived in a direction and with intent that is in line with who you want it to be, right? Like, if I die tomorrow, I think I would be sad that I didn't get more time to accomplish all the things I wanted to accomplish, but I wouldn't regret the way that I've lived my life. I truly feel like I've tried to live my life to the fullest ever since I was 19. Now, if I had died that day in Iraq at 19 or 20, I think I was 20 at the time, I would have regretted my life a lot. I would have really, really regretted how little I lived my life. Like how much stuff I just didn't try, how much stuff I didn't get to do. Like Sergio, I meant like they did not want to die, screaming for help, all that stuff. I feel like people will have regret when they're dying no matter what. I don't think so. Hey, how's it going, Strens? Welcome. Thanks for the follow. Welcome to the stream. I just, like, I can only speak for myself. And I would imagine that a lot of other people who have the same mindset and mentality as me probably would say the same thing. But I don't think I would regret dying tomorrow. Like, I don't think I would feel regret for how my life went, for the things that I haven't been able to experience, all that. I wouldn't have regret over that. I would feel, a better word would be, I would feel sort of, I'd be sad that I didn't get an opportunity to do those things, but I wouldn't regret anything that's happened to me. I wouldn't regret any of the decisions I've made. I wouldn't regret having not done more at this point in my life. I feel like I've, uh, you know, taken every decision I've made since the age of 20 to its extent. I've taken every decision I made and ridden it all the way out so far, and I'm continuing to do that. And that's actually the big reason why I don't think I would regret, is because I'm continuing to do that. If you fear you're dying, you aren't living right because you know you have more work to work on. You have more to work on. Yeah, it's not that you aren't living right. It's that you're not being honest with what you want. Like, this is actually something that a lot of Stoic philosophers would do as a thought experiment and as an exercise. Imagine you die tomorrow. You know you're going to die tomorrow. What are the things that you would regret not doing today? What are the things that you would regret having not started until now? Because if those are the things that you would think about on your deathbed, maybe that should change how you're living your life now. And that's why, like, a lot of decisions I've made, I mean, they may seem super risky to a lot of people. They may seem kind of stupid, right? Especially a lot of business decisions I made, a lot of stuff about money. I make them because they're in line with things that are going to keep me on the path that I want to be on. And I'm not going to, I would regret more if I'd made the smart decision in some cases. I would regret past choices I made that are pretty much irreversible. Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, by all means, like, there are definitely choices I made in the past that I regret the decision I made, but it's also just part of life, right? We all make bad decisions at times, and rather than dwelling on the regret of making the decision, you should be thinking, well, because I felt bad about that decision, it changed who I was in the future after that, and now I act in a different way. You wouldn't be able to be that unless you had made the mistake that prompted the change in you. So you shouldn't regret the decision itself at this point in your life because you're past that. You would never be who you are now if you hadn't made mistakes and learned from them. And that's why I said if I died at the age of 20, I would regret a lot of my life. If I died now, I regret none of my life. It doesn't change everything I did until I was 20. That is what it is. But because I've been able to go past that, I don't regret any of this stuff before anymore, because that's what made me what I am now. I wouldn't be able to get here without all the bullshit that I went through kind of, when I was a teenager. Maybe straying off topic, but when you bring up regret, you also bring up how you want your life to be. What if you don't know what you want your life to be? You're still young, you're not sure about anything. That's the work. And that's a topic that I know is going to keep coming up over and over. But I want to reiterate, because this is the most important thing you can do as a young person, but especially as a young man. The most important thing you can do is get in the habit of self-reflection and understanding yourself, because that will tell you what your direction should be. That will tell you what you want out of life. And the best way to do that is to think about, what are the things that I intuitively believe that define me? Who am I? And then what are the things that I want to do, right? So I knew from a very young age that I never wanted to work a desk job. It was very, very basic. That was the only thing I knew. When I was like 6, my parents divorced. I spent a lot of time going to my mom's office. She's a software engineer. She worked in a cubicle. And I would sit there for hours just like playing on Microsoft Paint, waiting for her to get off work. And I would see her at work just typing away. And I'm like, man, this is miserable. This is not what I want in life. So I knew from that age, I never, ever would end up in a cubicle. I think I told her that when I was like 10 or 11, and she laughed at me. She's like, everybody ends up in a cubicle. But no, I decided that early, I will never end up in a cubicle. That's not what I'm going to do. And my whole life has been trying to get away from that. When I joined the military, it was so that I wouldn't ever have to work a desk job. I wanted to go, and they tried to put me in intelligence. And I was like, there's no fucking way I'm doing a desk job in the military. I wanted to go out. I wanted to be with people. I knew I wanted to work with people too later on, but I wish I'd realized that early. I mean, it just depends though, because if we're talking about regret and all those past experiences dictating who we are, I would not have made that decision. I would not have made that realization if my parents hadn't gotten divorced and if I hadn't gotten stuck going to our office every day. Right? So in a lot of ways, you know, how we frame what happens to us in life dictates who we become and is neither positive or negative. I actually don't believe in a lot of positive and negative events in your life. I think a lot of things happen and then you just need to do the best with what you're given. Yeah, the military does invest a bit in esports. Actually, you know how I was recruited into the Army? They gave me a CD and it was a free copy of America's Army, the video game. And it was a great game. It was actually really well designed. It was like a better version of, it was like COD meets Battlefield. And like it was super realistic. You go through basic training in the beginning, all this stuff. But yeah, it was a game. Yeah, AA. Yep. That's what got me into the Army. Yeah, they knew. I was, you know, all these kids were gamers. Yeah, dude, Double Lift cost me some money, dude. I put a bet on FlyQuest and they fucked me. But yeah, okay. Army is not for everyone. And that's the other thing. I talk a lot about my experience in the military as a positive, and it really was for me. It really changed my life for the better, and I wouldn't be who I am if I had gone through that experience. But I would say 75% of people in the US and at least 60 to 70% of guys should not be in the military. Like not that they should. They won't do well. They won't get out of the military what I got out of it. Actually, I'd say like 85 to 90% of people who go into the military don't get out of the military what I got out of it. And that's specifically because of a combination of factors, right? Who I am, and then how I viewed that situation, and then the work that I did to make it meaningful for me. Everyone I worked with in my unit, like none of those guys approached being in the military the way I approached being in the military. Because it was like an idealistic thing for me. I've been into military philosophy and military history since I was like in elementary school. I think in fourth grade, I read the Iliad and I decided I wanted to be Achilles. You know, I like I said, I've always been obsessed with wanting to change the world. I always wanted to be the best general. I was reading about Alexander by sixth grade. I was studying military tactics by middle school. That's the Odyssey. The Iliad is a story about the invasion of Troy and the War of Troy. And there's a lot about it. There's a lot of themes in that book that really resonate with me that are specific to even what we're talking about. So think about the story of Achilles. Achilles knew that if he went to Troy, he would die, but he would die a hero. He would die the greatest warrior ever born. If he stayed home, he would have a long life. He'd have grandchildren, all this stuff. What did he choose? He chose the option that made him memorable for all time. And that's what I mean. I read about that when I was a kid, and that's like what I wanted to be. So when I went into the military, I had a very different approach about it. It had nothing to do with the war in Iraq. It had nothing to do with school after. It had nothing. Those were all ancillary things about it, right? Obviously, tuition is nice. It had nothing to do with serving my country. Like that's a joke. No knock on anyone who is patriotic, but I think joining the military to serve your country is the fastest way to realize that it's all bullshit. They don't give a fuck about you in the military. You are a number. And your country honestly does not give a fuck about you in the military. Like they would sooner sacrifice your entire unit to get some votes in an election or to make someone some money than actually take care of you. They don't care about you. So why the hell should you care about the idea of the country? It's so flawed. And everyone I knew that struggled heavily in the military mentally joined for those reasons. Everyone I know, like, this is the problem, like Vietnam and all these other places that we went to where there was not a clear cut reason why we're there. You know, the last war where people did not come back with these issues was like World War II, maybe Vietnam. I mean, not, I'm sorry, Korea, not Vietnam. Definitely not Vietnam. Korea and World War II are the last couple of wars where we went in knowing that we were truly fighting a war that sort of mattered and felt important, for us as a nation. Every war since has been a business decision. And if you go into the army and you have this idea that in your head that you're serving your country, you're going to defend freedom, you're going to help people, whatever fucking lie they tell you. And you go there and you realize what it is. And then you see how you get treated there and how you get treated after, and the mentality that all these politicians have about the military and how they want to use you. That shit will disillusion you so fast. And then you're going to realize that all the sacrifices that you went through, all the pain that you had, all of your friends who got hurt or killed, and all the fucking suffering that you had to experience is for bullshit like that. You're not going to take it well. And you're not going to handle the long-term consequences of it well. The reason I don't think I came back with PTSD was because I didn't think of the wars. Like, it wasn't surprising to me to see a lot of the shit I saw. It was just part of what it was. And to be honest, I probably should have gone to therapy after that. And I didn't. I just kind of dealt with it. I didn't sleep very much for like a year. But I also knew going into it, like, I'm here because this is a personal journey of mine. I'm here for the experience. I'm here for the suffering. So if you can approach it that way, you're going to be fine. I loved basic training. Basic training was one of the most fun things in my life. And it was some of the worst experiences I've ever had. Like, it was so much suffering. Like, I look back now and I'm like, when I was 18, I was hardcore. I could not do what I did then now. Like, it was mental, physical anguish. I loved basic. It was like some of the greatest times of my life. And I remember even during it, in the middle of suffering, I was thinking to myself, man, enjoy this now because you'll never ever be here again. And there's very little in life that can give you the feeling of what basic is, because when you're in basic training, you don't think about anything beyond the moment. You don't think about tomorrow. You don't think about yesterday. You don't think about what's at home as much unless you're not doing something. That's why they keep you so busy. All you think about is what you are currently doing the current day, how to survive the current day. A lot of the same that it is in Iraq. All you think about is what you're doing that day. There's a liberating feeling about that. If you survive, I mean, but again, like I said, you just have to accept that survival is a condition that you don't always get to determine. All you can do is your best. Your mom can't see through fireworks. Yeah, you know, when we got back from Iraq, it was July. Oh no, it was June, late June. So the first weekend we got to go out was July 4th. And man, we were in Savannah at the Riverwalk, with all of my buddies that we just got back from Iraq. And when those fireworks went off, it was hilarious how many, you could tell who had just deployed. We all hit the ground. Like, we were all underneath tables and stuff, and everyone else was just standing there. It was like immediate. But then even that, like, you know, fireworks don't bother me. And like, they never did actually, except for that one incident. It was like the immediate gut reaction. After that, like, they don't bother me because mortars didn't bother me. Like, yeah, that's really shitty for her, though. I mean, I know it's like that for a lot of people, but that's what I mean. Like, I think I had a very unique experience and response to war than most people, and 90% of people will not have the same outcome that I got, and I'm incredibly lucky. That's what I always tell. That's what I always say too. Is like, I'm incredibly lucky for the experience that I had and how it didn't fuck me up mentally or physically. All I got out of it was positivity, but Yeah, fireworks haven't ever bothered me because even when I was in Iraq, like mortars didn't bother me because I didn't care anymore. A lot of the times we were getting bombed or we were getting mortared and stuff like that from afar. It was like I was more annoyed that I had to leave the dining hall and I was hungry and I had to go wait in this fucking concrete bunker until the mortars stopped, and then I could go back and maybe finish my lunch or whatever. Um, why it didn't bother me was because I just rationalized that, hey, if a mortar hits me, I'm dead. There's nothing I can do about it. So don't stress about it. I was inadvertently already into Stoic philosophy at that point. I didn't know it as Stoicism. I brought the book Meditations that was written by Marcus Aurelius, who today's passage was from. That was the only one of two books I brought with me to Iraq was Meditations and Machiavelli's The Prince, because I wanted to balance it out. So The Prince is all about the ends justify the means, a dictatorship, how to rule. But a lot of what he describes and a lot of the ideas that he has are all about how you get the most effectiveness out of your decisions at the cost of everything else. And you have to be willing to break a few eggs to make an omelet. And then to counterbalance that, I brought Meditations, which is all about how to be a good person, how to be a good man, how to be a wise, benevolent ruler. Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying I was like incredibly learned or anything. Like I wasn't super academic. It was just that I was aware of these two books as to what they represented. And made the decision to bring both because I wanted to have a dichotomous view of how to be a leader. And this again ties into the fact that I was talking about how I've been training myself since childhood to be a leader of people. And I always thought it was going to be a military leader. And my disillusionment with the military is that I realized that our leadership is incredibly incompetent at a lot of places. And the only way to get there is to go through this whole good boy system and make friends with certain people. It's very political. So I was like, it's not what it used to be. Competency is not going to be rewarded at all times. So yeah, I've been training myself since childhood to be the greatest general I could be. I wanted to lead people into combat and conquer nations and be Alexander the Great. I would set up scenarios in which I would array two roughly even or uneven armies on a piece of paper on a map and then set terrain and try to rationalize both sides of the battle and see which one I would actually win. I have copies of a bunch of historical military texts. Yeah, but all right, Mai, thank you so much for dropping in and chatting with me. Have a good night in a different way. Yeah, and that's kind of funny. It's like now I see myself as trying to do the same thing in a very different arena. My enemy now, the way I see it, I've seen this very recently, are all these other people that are trying to lead people to be something that I disagree with. My enemy is not the internet. My enemy is a part of the internet. Which is why I find it really interesting whenever I see opportunities to engage these people. It's a joke. Okay. Yeah, I always find it's fun for me. And I enjoy engaging these people in discussion because I see them as my enemy. And not that I want to destroy them. I want to convert them. I want to confront their ideas. The real battlefield is on the ideas. Yo, what's up, veteran? Thank you for the follow. Welcome, man. The real battle is in confronting the ideas that they're espousing, the ideas that they're trying to spread with my own. And I'm developing my weapons. And this is one of them. Like my ability to have conversations with people in a real setting, real world setting, like a real life setting. And then also to have the ability to discuss things with them directly online on Twitter and stuff like that. Those are things I'm learning. And I feel like I'm getting better at it. And I understand it better now. Because at the end of the day, like, the weapons that I have are sharpened because I practice them and I think about them. And most of these people can't win against me when I'm debating them on this stuff because the weapons that they have are given to them and they don't know how to use them. They're using regurgitated talking points with no evidence. They didn't reach these conclusions on their own. So how the hell could they debate someone on conclusions that they've reached on their own? I don't have any beliefs that I haven't thought about. Everything that I believe, everything that I say, I have logical rationale for, and I can explain myself, and I can tell you exactly why it is I believe that. Now, if you can give me contrary evidence to the opposite, and it's legitimate evidence, I'm more than willing to change my views on it because that's the right thing to do. They're not. So inherently, this is what's come up a lot in that recent tweet I had. These people are throwing random talking points at me, and it makes no sense because it's not directed and it's not based on any sort of facts or logic. I will confront it with my view on it because I am basing my opinion on facts and logic, and they have no answer. And so they start yelling and name calling because they don't know what to do. They threw their one thing, and it was highly ineffective because it made no sense, and they don't know how to use it. And of course they're just going to lose. So they default to making fun of you, whatever, right? And that's the other thing, is that the typical things that they like to make fun of, they can't with me. And so they literally have nothing. You know, they can call me, oh, you're a loser, purple-haired libtard, you know? You're probably scrawny and weak. No, I could probably kick 99% of their asses. And I am definitely not that, you know? But see, it's like a lot of people reach out like, hey, I hope you're okay. Sorry you have to deal with this. I literally don't give a shit. I think it's a great opportunity. I see it as a challenge, and I like it. So, you know, it's funny when people want to try to fight me on Twitter and stuff. I'm like, 90%, like the vast majority of the time, there's no way I'm actually worried about it. And there's probably no way they're actually going to win. Now, it would be interesting to have a conversation with someone like Andrew Tate, or to be one of the people, or to talk to one of the people who's promoting the ideas and giving them the weapons that they're trying to use. Because I assume he or people behind him are the ones who created those ideas and are the ones who reach these conclusions on their own, I would assume. And if they did, now that would be an interesting discussion. I want to talk to someone who's actually come up with those ideas on their own. Because that's the real test of your own ideas. Until you engage with someone who has contrary ideas, that has reached those ideas and reached those conclusions based on logic and rationale, you don't really know how defensible your viewpoint is. And that's another reason I kind of like engaging with these people online, is that it reinforces what I believe it to some degree. You know, some people think that watching a whole bunch of the opposite views media is bad for you. I think it's very good, because you will either see the point that they're trying to make and you can understand the rationale behind what they're saying, or it reinforces what you think because you can see why that's wrong. Now, it's important to note that I'm not saying you watch it and you assume it's wrong. You watch it at face value and you try to logically determine what's wrong about it. So I tend to try to look at every issue or every event from both sides. Where I'll look, you know, the Fox News article about it and then the CNN headline about it. Just kind of looking at both sides of that. And then what I try to think about is, why are they both wrong? And then why are they both right? There are certain things about each that fit into both categories. And similarly, when I talk to a lot of these random incel red pill losers, I should say that, the viewpoints that they have often are logical when given the context of the premises they believe. Most of the issue that they have is that the premises that they're using are not true. They're not true. So how can you ever reach the right conclusion if your premises are at fault? You can't. So we have to challenge that. And that's why, as much as I can, I try to get to the crux of why they believe what they believe and identify which premise is the one at fault. And I talk about that. And the vast majority either will acknowledge and just basically stop engaging, or like this one guy yesterday and today, just keep talking themselves into a corner when it got to the point he proved himself wrong and then just started saying that you just don't understand, and then called me a name. And I was like, dude, you straight up posted a quote that directly contradicted what you just said, and I explained it to you, and then you got mad. Like, that's what inevitably will happen. So, all right, Scald, have a good night. Thanks for dropping by as usual. Um, no, I don't want to try to characterize Andrew Tate as anything because I don't watch a ton of his content, but I've seen enough of it. But I have seen enough interviews with him and discussions with him where I think he's a lot like me in that he has a lot of things that he'll say that he has a rationale for saying. I disagree with his rationale. I disagree with the evidence that he provides in order to draw the conclusions that he does. So that's why I think it'd be an interesting conversation because I'm basically dealing with his like peons, right? I'm fighting the goblins. These guys aren't even worth experience. Like I don't even get experience from killing these guys. I want to meet a boss. Yeah, he's a contrarian for sure. He knows what gets clicks. He's got a business built around it, right? And part of that, unfortunately, what drives interaction the most is being a contrarian and being on the side of pushing a narrative. Like this is something that's been happening in politics a lot, but it's true in a lot of fields. The more niche your focus is, the more diehard that fan base becomes. So if you can appeal to a smaller audience that's much more extreme, they are more likely to die for you. It gets too extreme. Oh yeah, all the time. All the time. Like right now, politics in this country is an absolute nightmare because both parties have realized this and have both been pushing further and further towards their polls because guess what? The vast majority of America doesn't vote. Like something like 60 to 70% of this country doesn't vote. And the rest of the country, the 20% on either side that does, of course they're going to be the most extreme. So if you're any political party on either side, Democrat or Republican, it behooves you to appeal most to the guaranteed votes and then hopefully sway some of the middle. It does not behoove you to try to convince the middle at all because the vast majority of the middle is not going to vote. And that puts you in a weaker position because you're going to get shafted by the extreme right, and you're going to get shafted by the extreme left, and you're not going to be able to garner enough votes because the people in the middle don't actually vote. That's the problem with the US. And so strategically, it makes a lot of sense for parties to continue polarizing the way they are. Yeah. I mean, voting third party is essentially throwing your vote away right now. But the problem is, if more people don't try to vote third party, we'll never have a third party. It's really messed up. Like, there's a reason why this country actually can't get better anymore. It's because democracy is inherently flawed for running a large nation. Democracy will never, ever be an efficient system. UK has a lot of people not voting, but there's a more push. Yeah. I mean, you think about the size of our nation, though, compared to most other countries in Europe, stuff like that. UK is less than the size of California. So, like, you're asking a lot. Especially because an American trait or tendency is to be rebellious. Jalen Green? I don't even know who that is, to be honest. Basketball player? Did he get traded somewhere? Is it? I don't know what to say about that. I don't really follow basketball that much. I kind of watch the final, but it's not my sport. I follow football a lot more closely. Do you think he's good looking? I mean, he's not my type. No, I don't know. I guess he's good looking enough. He's a tall basketball player. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm a little confused. Also, yeah, thank you guys for the follows too. Nye for your mom, Kaitria, Strens. Samuel Wise, Grimes Reaper, appreciate you all. Tyranny, Noisy Bonk. Yeah, thanks for the follows. I'm only going to stream for maybe another like 10 minutes or so. So any other questions or stuff you want to discuss? Otherwise, let me get to the last sentence. I know we're going all the way back here, but the last sentence in this passage, willingly accept what's outside your control. That goes all the way back to the very first stream I did on this, which was about the dichotomy of control. Learning to accept what's out of your control is very powerful. It's very, very important to be able to do that in order to not stress about things outside of your control. So to reiterate, control your perceptions, direct your actions, and understand acknowledge what's under your control. If you can do those three things, you're going to have a much happier life because you're controlling what's coming into your brain. You're controlling what you do, which is output. And then that reflects into you, right? If you're doing things that you want to do and you're doing things that make you truly happy, you're going to feel happier about what you're doing. And then control what you can control. Don't worry about what you can't control. That's like, if you could do those three things in life, you're gonna have a really good time. I'm trying to get my first job, but the jobs I'm applying to want experience, but I have no experience because I've never worked before. What should I do? Well, you have to apply to a range of jobs. So, or you have to get an interview somehow and then make the most of that opportunity by saying, hey, I know you guys are looking for people with experience. I don't have any, but what I do bring is the ability to learn very quickly and to work very hard. And I want this to be a position in which I can gain that experience in a good way quickly, and I can still be valuable to you. A lot about getting your first job is about picking the right first job. So maybe if you give me some context as to what jobs you're looking for, I could give you more specific advice. My first job was working at Albertsons, a grocery store. I was a bagger. It was the lowest position there. I just basically brought carts in, I bagged people's groceries, and I cleaned up stuff. Pretty straightforward 16-year-old job, you know? But I was doing it because I needed to make some money, and I understood that, look, it doesn't matter what I do. I just need a job. I need to start putting myself into a position where I have to work for my money. And it was really kind of shitty. I quit after 3 months because they wanted me to join a union. And I didn't want to. I ended up working at Target, which is a big corporation, as a cashier, made more money, but it was also equally as shitty. So those were good first jobs though, because I learned about work ethic. I learned about being responsible and on time. And I learned about how to deal with having a supervisor. Those are traits and qualities that you can't really fake those things. So part-time jobs like Walmart, yeah, perfect. Look, you just like what they're looking for at these jobs from someone like you. I'm assuming you're young, right? If you're young and you're applying for these jobs, you're not going to come in competing with people who have experience. Don't try to lean on that. Leverage the fact that, hey, you know, I'm young, but I'm here to work really hard. I am here to gain experience. I want to do a good job, and I want to, you know, eventually, I think I can learn a lot from working here that will help me reach my career goals in the future. I want to be a Giga Chad like Jordan. I don't think I'm a Giga Chad yet. I think it's a process. In my opinion, like someone who would be defined as a Giga Chad is someone at the end of the process. I'm not at the end of my process yet. I'm still very, very much in the beginning. But this is when everything is starting to make sense to me. You sent an application to Walmart 3 weeks ago, haven't heard anything. Here's a trick. Talk to the manager or the supervisor. Be like, hey, I just wanted to check in. I sent an application about 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything. Can I get an update? You doing that is going to set you apart from every single other person that applied. If I was the person in charge of doing interviews, you'd be at top of the list. Because you showed you cared. And that is something that no resume is going to show. If you actually follow up with them and ask, go in person, whatever, be like, hey, I dropped off an application about 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything. I just wanted to see if I can get an update on it, or if there's any other information that you need from me. I guarantee if you do that, like you are immediately putting, like, you're giving yourself an advantage. And what does it cost you? Nothing. It costs you time, which you have right now. And it might cost you a little bit of your ego if they say, oh, we just don't think you're good enough right now. But you know what? Your follow-up, if they say, we didn't think your application was strong enough, I would say, look, I really want this job. And I understand that I might not meet the qualifications right now. So what do you have any suggestions for how I can meet those qualifications soon? What would you suggest that I do? And they might just give you another job. This is what I tell all my students. Demonstrate a willingness to improve, and you are setting yourself up for so much success. And don't just say it, like, be it. Do it. You know, if they say, oh, your resume is lacking this and this, go home and change it. And then be like, okay, the ideas that you gave me, oh, you should probably get another job first. I'm going to try to do that. And when I do that, I'm going to work there for a couple months. I'm going to come back and I'm going to reapply. Like, if you do that, you're guaranteed a job when you come back. Like, nobody does that. Nobody puts in the barest minimum of effort to show that they care about anything. And that's a flaw that our society in the US has permeated at a younger and younger age, man. Like, kids today don't give a shit about stuff, and it's really bad. It's really bad. The idea that you want to go through life acting like you don't care about anything is possibly the worst thing you could do. Hey, I mean, you got my attention. It's all good. You have to care. Because if you don't care, nobody else cares about your life, to be honest. Your parents, your mom might care, but she's not going to be around here forever. She's not going to, she's not going to be able to control everything for you at some point. He's not going to be your dad, whatever. You have to care because nobody is going to do the work for you in the long run. So I tell everyone, like, don't fall into the trap of acting like nothing matters and you shouldn't have to care. That's a big issue I had when I was younger. And it wasn't until I went to the military that I realized that everything both matters and doesn't matter, and you should care about it. You should care about what does matter. You know? Like, it's just, you don't have enough time left on Earth, honestly, to not care. Have I heard of Pascal's wager? I have not. Let me look it up. Let's see. Human beings wager with their lives whether God exists or not. You know, this actually, you know what's funny? So the concept is that a rational person should live as though God exists and seek to believe in God. If God does not exist, they will only have some finite loss, whereas if God does exist, they stand to receive infinite gains. So this is an argument that I had when I was like a teenager. And this is, so my mom was Catholic. She raised me to be Catholic. And I had a godfather and all this stuff. And the deal was at 18, I would decide whether or not I wanted to be Catholic or believe in religion, whatever. And so for a while, but when I was a teenager before I turned 18, I was like, well, logically, it makes sense to just be Christian or Catholic. It makes sense because if God is real, great, I win. If God's not real, I don't really lose anything, right? That was my logic. As I've gotten older, when I turned 18, obviously I decided I'm not going to be Catholic. And that's for different reasons. It's mostly because I didn't really like the way the church operated, and I didn't really like organized religion as a whole. My viewpoint now is skewed more towards the idea of heaven being what it is so ludicrous to me that it makes less sense for me to believe in it as a real thing and change the way that I behave. Instead, I live my life according to a set of moral values that I think are in line with objective morality. And if God is pissed that I was a good person my whole life, but I didn't worship him, and he wants to send me to hell, I mean, that's not the God that I want to worship. I don't give a shit about the ego of a God that would say, because you didn't worship me, you deserve to go to hell. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so the whole thing for me is a logical issue of heaven itself is illogical. The God that you're supposed to fear is seemingly illogical. And the reward and the consequence are both illogical. Why would I base my entire life, which is sort of centered around a logical approach, why would I base my life on an idea that I find illogical in every single way? And it was written by people less than 3,000 years ago, which is a blink of an eye in the span of humanity. Why the hell wouldn't I worship the Greek gods? They worshiped their gods for way longer than Christians had their God. Right? In some ways, the Greek gods make more sense to me. Fucking Zeus throws a lightning bolt. I can see that shit. Like, that actually makes more sense to me. Like, you should fear those gods. They're illogical. They're irrational. They're not omnipotent. They have failings. They're more like, they're more like people. I can actually understand them. It's not a religion debate. I'm expressing my view on why I don't practice religion. To me, it doesn't make any sense. At the end of it, and I talked about this yesterday too, at the end of it, the only thing you can have is true faith. And if you don't have true faith, then there is no basis for religion. If you don't believe that the Bible is a holy text, then everything it says is a matter of subjectivity. Even the stories are a matter of subjectivity. There are people who literally think that Noah put 2 of every fucking animal on a homemade boat made of wood to survive that's ludicrous. That doesn't even make sense. It would only make sense in the context of it's a story that's supposed to represent something, or it's not literal. He might have put 2 of every sort of type of animal that he could find in his little 10-acre farm that he lived on his whole life because he's a farmer. Sure, he had 12 animals on this boat. Great. And then his 2 friends wrote about it. It just doesn't make any sense. We couldn't put every animal on Earth on a single boat now with all of the technology we'd have to be bigger than the fucking continent of North America. So, is that I don't agree with Christianity. Shouldn't you find an alternative religion by that logic instead? No, because that wager only makes sense if you believe in an afterlife as portrayed in a Judeo-Christian sense. I mean, why not believe in what, Buddhists believe, which is in reincarnation? That's been around for way longer than Christianity. If I don't believe in the afterlife as an idea, then Pascal's wager makes no sense. That's what I'm getting at. Okay. I do have to end stream here, unfortunately. I have a call I have to take. But this is a good one. I definitely, I know it's a little dangerous sometimes, but I'm definitely down to talk more about religion because it's actually something I studied for a little bit. Part of the deal of me deciding whether or not I wanted to be Christian when I was 18 was I studied a lot of theology. I went to a lot of debates. I went to a lot of talks about whether or not God exists from both sides. And it's really interesting. It's interesting stuff. So thank you guys all for your time. Really appreciate it. I love doing these. I probably won't stream tomorrow, but maybe in a couple days. So, but yeah, have a good night. Take care, everybody. And remember, think about what you really want in life. And every decision you make, try to get a little bit closer to that. All right. Have a good night.